Hello, learners. Hope that you are keeping well. Today, we're going to look at the rural and urban settlements in settlement geography, and we are going to look at the first section, which is the study of settlements. Okay, I think the first thing for us to do is to look at our exam guideline, and in this section, we're going to look at the concept of settlement, site, situation, rural and urban settlements, where we're going to differentiate, and the classification of settlements according to pattern and function. Now, when I look at the one here on size and complexity, I'm not going to do it in this section. I'm going to actually integrate it with urban hierarchy concepts, and I think it'll give you a better understanding of the size and complexity. So let's get going. All right. Now, a settlement actually is where people live. Sometimes say where people live and interact, but it's basically where people live. What size is a settlement? It can be any size. It can be a large city, metropolitan area, or it just can be a single house or farmstead like this. So it can vary in size. These are more permanent settlements. And of course, your settlement can be temporary. Now we're looking here at a refugee camp. This is a temporary settlement, all right, for these people until problems are sorted out or they get permanent residences, etc. Okay, so that's your temporary. So let's summarize. All right, let me put up my highlighter. A settlement is a place where people live. Okay, let's look at some of the characteristics. As we said, vary in size from very small to extremely large. Okay, it can be one house or farmstead, which is small, or it will be a megalopolis. We'll come across this concept later on when I'm doing interaction or integration rather between your urban hierarchy concepts and your classification of settlements, etc. Okay, now that of course is huge. It can be temporary or permanent. Now, a refugee camp is considered temporary. Okay, so we've got a fairly good description of what is a settlement. Okay, so let's look at some of the concepts. Let's look at the concept site, which is the actual location of a settlement on the earth. The term includes the physical characteristics of the landscape of a specific area. So it actually deals with where the settlement actually is and what made the settlement be there. All right, like it's a farming settlement, you will look at various things such as fertile soil, etc. So it's the actual location, and the physical includes the physical characteristics of that specific area. So some of the site factors itself will include landforms, climate, if it's good enough to farm there. I'm just using that as an example. Vegetation, availability of water. If you're taking farming again, you would need water to farm. Soil quality. If it's infertile soil, you won't be able to farm properly. Minerals in the area, raw materials, and then also look at things like wet point settlement. Okay, uh, this needs to settlements that are close to the water supply. Maybe there's a shortage of water in the area. Maybe there's just a lake or something of that sort, and then the farmers would come closer to that area for that water. Also, dry point settlement, these are settlements that avoid risking of flooding. Okay, what we are saying here is sometimes there's a lot of water and the river can flood. So what do? We actually move away to a higher area or further away to avoid the flooding. So let's look at this, learners. And if you look here, we will see that in this case, the site factors will be the river or the marsh or the lake. All right. And this will supply fresh water, possibly fish, for food also. The water could be used for the farming. Then the forest, another side factor here, which supplies wood for building materials. You can build your houses, etc., with the wood. Obviously, when it's nearer to the river, all right, we would have fertile land. And also, judging from this area, it looks relatively flat. So these are the site factors that would have made this settlement decide to settle in this area. Okay, let's go on. Then, situation is the location of a place relative to its surroundings and other places. So, if the farmer puts his farm in this area, it's not only that he just looks at the site factor and says that there's enough flat land, enough fertile soil, enough raw materials like the trees to build. He also has to look at other factors, and that is in relation to his situation. Example, transport routes leading out of the area and connecting other areas like the market. All right. So he needs to look at that because if he's going to produce on a commercial basis, he needs to transport his goods. So one of it would be accessibility, transport routes connecting other areas. Okay, so that he can transport his stuff. He can also bring in stuff, machinery, etc., that he would need. Another factor could be proximity to the market. That's also a situation factor. If it's are very far, it'll be very, very costly. Also, if there's no market in the area, he may not sell his crops in the area. So he needs to be look at the proximity of the market. Okay, let's look at this situation here in this little picture. All right, we can see clearly this settlement is situated. Look at the infrastructure, the transport routes leading out of the area. There is water supply nearby, that or the rivers, okay, which looks as if it's navigable. There seems to be the ocean on that side. Okay, so the situation of this has been influenced by various factors. Okay, now let's look at the next concept, urban and rural. Okay, we can see there's a clear difference between your urban and rural. When I look at the urban, I see the high building density, I see massive infrastructure. All right. I look at all that. And another thing about the urban area, it is multifunctional. It means it has secondary activities such as manufacturing, and it has services in your tertiary activity, such as your banks, educational facilities, etc. And when we look at the rural area, we don't see this major density and infrastructure. All right. We just see lots of open spaces, vegetation around the area, possibly farming, etc. So it's basically concentrated on primary activities, extraction of raw materials, or using the earth to plant crops, etc. So, in other words, we can say that the urban area is unifunctional and the or multifunctional rather. See, I'm even confusing myself. It's multifunctional, and the rural area is unifunctional. Multi, it has more than one function. Uni, it has one function. Okay, so let's look at it in here, this little sketch. All right, settlement, rural, single functional, primary activities, urban, multifunctional, secondary, and tertiary activities. Okay, now we look at the next thing, which is your pattern. All right, and let's see what the pattern focuses on. The main thing the pattern focuses on, the distance between buildings. Okay, the distance between buildings. That's how you will determine the pattern, okay, of the buildings. Now, many of us tend to mix up the word pattern and shape. Please, learners, lots of times we find this in exams that these two are mixed up. Pattern refers to clearly the distance. Like here, if I get my laser pointer, all right, it's close, the buildings are close together. So it is nucleated. All right, and here the buildings are far apart and therefore it is dispersed or isolated. Can you see it? It's far apart. Okay, this, on the other hand, I'm just showing you here. The buildings are situated along this road. That would be your shape and not your pattern. Okay? So we're looking at these, the building densities, in terms of far apart, dispersed, or isolated, when you got one farmstead and nothing around it, or nucleated. That is your settlement patterns. So looking at a nucleated settlement pattern, I would look at this here, and if I get my highlighter, all right, I would say buildings are close together. You can see clearly in this area how the buildings are close together. All right, that's your nucleated pattern. They are clustered all together in the area. All right, let's go to the next one, the dispersed pattern or isolated. Buildings are far apart. You can see the distance here between the buildings. They far apart. All right. So they isolated or dispersed. That's your patterns. All right. Let's take shapes. All right. Okay. The most common or the shapes involve the interaction with the surrounding areas. Now, when we look at the surrounding areas, maybe there's a road, the shape will go according to that. All right. Now, when I wrote here in terms of shape, sometimes you may find that the word says the most common patterns. Patterns in terms of shape, not settlement patterns. I put this word in here because sometimes in resources you find this word does appear. Do not confuse it with settlement patterns. But the shapes that you get are various: linear, rectangular, circular, semicircular, cross, T shape. All right, these are common ones, okay, that you would find. Okay, now when I say its relation to the surrounding landscape or features, what do I mean? Let's take a resource. Let's look at this linear pattern. There is a road along the way there. Can you see it? a road. I'll just get my laser pointer again. Can you see the road here? Right along this way. And the buildings are situated along the road to create a linear pattern. Now look at the surrounding areas. Again, here there is a crossroad. It's crossing over. And therefore, the buildings are situated along the road. Remember, they would need the transport in both cases. Transport is needed. It's important, especially for people in the area to move out if they're businesses or if they're farming or whatever. All right. Now, here also infrastructure has determined this. Can you see it's all developing as the roads lead out and it's more star shaped? Here, there's a T junction, okay, which has made the shape more T-shaped. Can you see? Based on the road in the area. Here, although there's a road, it seems like a water source, which has allowed the settlements to develop. Maybe they're reliant on the water source, etc., but created more or less a circular pattern. So the surrounding area or the area around which the settlement develops also determines the shape of the area, not the pattern. Okay, now I want to look at some questions here. Just a few short questions. It's nice to do a few questions before we end the session. Now, I'm looking at this. Once again, please, learners, read. First thing, examiner gives you a little hint. It's rural settlement patterns. And again, you can pick up important information again in your mind if you really studied. You know patterns, dispersed, nucleated. Already it comes to your mind before you even look at the source itself, if you studied well. That's what I always talked about. Study, learn properly, smartly, know how to apply it. And geography becomes so easy. All right. So before I looked at the resource, I already looked at in my brain, dispersed, nucleated. Now let me look at this one. Okay. I can see it's more along the crossroads, eh? It's formed around there because of transport. I can see the buildings are close, but my main focus should be on the pattern. I don't need to go into so much detail. All right, it's close together, so it is nucleated. People are living closer. Here, I look at the buildings, which is farmhouses, as indicated here. The key is also very important. All right, and this one has a nice scale also. And we can see there's quite a distance between them, kilometers, more than 5 kilometers in some cases. So these buildings are far apart. It is dispersed. I look at the examiner gave me the letters A and the letter B. Okay, so I know I'm going to use that somewhere along the line. So A was my nucleated, B was my dispersed. Let's look at some of the questions here, and you look how easy it becomes. A nucleated settlement. Obviously, this is A. All right. Lacks privacy. Now, that's a different type of question. Where would they lack privacy? Where the buildings are close together or the buildings are far apart? All right. Of course, where the buildings are closer together. And if I look at my source, the buildings are closer together in A. So obviously my answer is A. Sharing of farming equipment. All right. Generally, we know in isolated settlements, they're far apart. They're not going to share. Okay. But where they're close together, there's a stronger chance of sharing of equipment. So, sharing of equipment is A again, where it is close together. Safety and security risks. I know some people say when people are close, it's not safe, but generally speaking, Your safety and security risk is when people live far away from one another, and if they're getting sort of robbed or anything or any danger, sometimes your neighbor is not close enough to help you. So this would be your dispersed settlement, which is B. Fragmented and broken up farmland. Fragmented and broken up farmland. All right. Do we have it with your settlement that is far apart? Generally, they commercial farmers, they're farming on a larger scale. All right. But where it's smaller units close together, different sort of farmsteads, etc., then you would find that each farmer may farm on his own. Sometimes you can get communal farming, all right, where it's nucleated. But where it's far apart, the land is big, generally speaking, the farmer farms on a whole farm. So looking at which is more correct, fragmented farmland will be with your nucleated settlement because there's various little settlements who may want to farm on their own, far from basic services like shops and schools. Now, if I go back to my sketch, which one would be far away from basic services? I look at this one. Let's look at this first. These are kilometers apart. Would a shop owner put a shop here when he's got this customer and the rest are kilometers apart? He's not going to put services there, such as shops, etc. Okay, because it's basically going to serve this. But if you look at this nucleated settlement, it's ideal for him to put a service here because there's so many people that will buy. And that's how you work out your questions, because you're going to get different types of application questions, and some need to be making sense to you. So these people obviously can travel to this little shop to buy stuff. But all these people in the area, he will have his customers. So in this case, you will find it'll be found more in A. Produces large yields. Obviously, I'm sorry, I'm doing the wrong slide. The small farms here. Okay, so generally speaking, I know we can have communal farming, but generally speaking, when there's lots of farmhouses, there'll be smaller farms. Yeah, it's a massive piece of land around this. So farming on a large scale will be with B, in an isolated settlement. All right. Uh, so we definitely will get larger yields. Each farmer will get larger yields because of the large farm size. Requires large amounts of money to practice farming. And once again, if I look at these two, this generally is your larger commercial farms. So if it's a larger farm, obviously you will need a lot of money to farm here. All right, to buy your machinery, labor supply, fertilizers, whatever, because it's large. Okay, so if I look at this one, requires large amounts of money to practice farming, and that will definitely be your B. Okay, now let's look at another little short question. Urban and rural settlements. And again, in this one, we've got the letter. And again, it should be again multifunctional for urban, tertiary, secondary services. For rural, it's just unifunctional, one thing, primary activities. Okay, so those things should already be playing in your mind. Why it should be playing in your mind? In the sense that the heading said rural, and I apologize again, said rural and urban settlement. My little highlighter doesn't seem to be working, and I'm going to try again. And here we are. There's the heading. Can you see how important this piece is? It actually gives you a hint about rural. And if you studied your work well, all these things come to mind, and the sources become very easy. A, B, examiners put that, has to be put in for a purpose. Yeah, we see building density, we see massive infrastructure, and we can see various buildings with activities. So this would be my urban area, multifunctional. Yeah, I see lots of vegetation. I do see sort of huts, and I see a lot of land around it. This will be my rural area. Okay, so let's get to the questions. Let's see this one. Settlement associated with secondary and tertiary. Clearly, it's multifunctional. So it's my urban area, which is A. Primary activities dominate. All right. So we're talking about extraction of raw materials, farming, etc. Okay. So that would definitely be rural B, known as unifunctional. Can you see the main words here? Unifunctional, one functional, definitely rural area. B has multiple functions. This becomes so easy, learners. You can score full marks. Multifunctional, that means secondary, tertiary, various functions. That will definitely be urban area. A, settlement is always nucleated. I know the word always is used here, but which settlement is generally nucleated? Farming you find sometime on a large scale, on a small scale. Okay, it can be isolated, can be nucleated, but urban areas, if you look at them, they always, especially where all the urban functions are, they're always close together. So it definitely has to be an urban area, which is A. Is an example of a city. Clearly, urban area, A, has the smallest settlement called a farmstead. That is B, which is your rural area. So we can work out answers also. Learners, I hope this will benefit you. I made some clear descriptions here. Remember, you have to apply the concepts. You keep well, enjoy your day.